South Africa's International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor says she hopes the decision of the UN Security Council demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza for the remainder of the month of Ramadan would spur on efforts towards a new hostage deal being negotiated in the region. 14 member states voted in favour of the text while the United States abstained, allowing for its passage after deploying numerous vetoes on earlier drafts. Pandor was speaking from Chicago with New York-based correspondent Sharon Rice-Peace covering the latest development in Gaza, South Africa's bilateral relationship with the United States amid efforts in Congress to punitively review it, and whether she will accede to a move by the African National Congress that has nominated her among candidates being considered to be the next Premier of the Western Cape.
Dr. Naledi Pandor, welcome back to SABC News. It's always good to have you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Sherwood.
Minister, I wanted to get your initial reaction to a development in the UN Security Council earlier Monday, where a draft resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza for the month of Ramadan and leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire passed with 14 votes in favour and, of course, a United States abstention. What's your reading of this resolution and the way forward now?
I think it's a very important step by the Security Council. But of course, knowing all the challenges and problems we've had with decisions of the UNSC, I'm cautiously happy. But I welcome the resolution and the fact that 14 out of the 15 voted in favor. I'm not surprised that the United States abstained. I think it's also, in fact, a good sign that they did not veto, having not supported previous resolutions on a ceasefire. I think they, had no choice but to semi-support because they recently moved a resolution on a ceasefire which wasn't supported by all the members of the Security Council. So cautiously optimistic. I believe it's an important step, and I hope it will put a spur to the negotiations that are underway with Egypt and Qatar supporting that process.
Both the United States and South Africa has framed the relationship between the two countries as vital, as very important. You and the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, have described each other as friends, and yet there are big disagreements between the two countries, notwithstanding South Africa's efforts at the International Court of Justice, accusing Israel of genocide, or your different approaches to both the wars in Gaza and Ukraine. How is this friendship, this close relationship, working to resolve these two files on the international community's agenda?
Well, firstly, I think message one, well, we didn't meet with Secretary Blinken because he's out of the country. He left on the day that we arrived and had indicated that he'd be leaving. And we had so many other meetings, we couldn't arrange a time to meet the Assistant Secretary. We just, had already filled the program quite substantively. But he had, when we met at the G20 in Brazil, encouraged me to pay a visit to the United States to meet influential representatives in both Congress and Senate, and also said, it would be important to reach out to think tanks, to the media. We've done all that. And thus far, we've had a very, I think, positive response. The message has been right at the start to say we value the relationship we have with the United States of America. Number two, while we do have different foreign policy perspectives on a range of issues, these reflect our country's policies. They are not a reason for conflict or hostility between us. And this is what I've been saying. South Africa is a very strong supporter of the promotion of human rights and the end of all forms of oppression against people who continue to suffer oppression. Hence our relationship and support for the people of Palestine. But this doesn't detract by any means from values that the United States of America holds dear, such as respect for human rights, for freedom and democracy. So those have been the key thrusts of the messages I've communicated in the range of meetings that we've held. And I've been quite surprised at the positive response and at the fact that I've observed that I think Americans are more and more concerned about the form of values that their own actions and the actions of their government are conveying about their country. So I do get a sense of a support for our own approach to human rights and the securing of freedom, justice, and democracy.
So you've laid out that this is a close relationship. Both you and your counterpart have talked about it being a vital relationship, that you both value this relationship. And yet you do point out that there are, quite big differences on certain issues, notwithstanding South Africa's efforts at the International Court of Justice, accusing Israel of genocide, or, of course, your different approaches to both the wars in Gaza and the war in Ukraine. How is your friendship working to resolve these two intractable conflicts?
On the matter of Ukraine and Russia, both South Africa and the United States are playing a role in facilitating discussions on the Zelensky 10-point plan. We've been in all the meetings together, and we continue to talk to each other and share views. We hold the view that we've had several of these meetings, and we now would like to move a step up. And the step up would be to get officials at similar levels to the ones who've been in these deliberations from Russia to come into the room and begin to hear their reflections on what is proposed and what alternatives they may have. So we'd like to move what we've been doing a step up. So America is working, as we are, and other countries on these matters. And I think we continue to collaborate. With respect to Israel and Palestine, we've made it clear that from well before the inception of our democracy, we've had a relationship with those fighting for freedom in Palestine. It's not something that is of recent occurrence. And given that relationship, but also showing importantly, we've pointed out a very strong identification with the experience of Palestinian people, which is akin to our experience as South Africans of apartheid. When you have to carry an identity document, which a security officer may ask you to produce at any moment, we know what that's like. When you can only walk a particular route and have a wall on one side and little space on the other, we know what that means as South Africans who lived under apartheid. When your land is seized without compensation. So all the experiences that form the full set of experiences of Palestinian people are experiences that we have had and that cause us, by virtue of history, to really have an understanding of the suffering of Palestinian people.
Minister, the conservative and business-friendly Wall Street Journal's editorial board at the weekend wrote the following, and I quote, "South Africa held hands with Hamas in January and charged Israel with genocide at the International Court of Justice. The episode and other developments are causing Congress to re-examine the U.S. relationship with our non-friends in Pretoria." Close quotes. They also refer to the passage of the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act through committee that now heads to the House for a full vote. It accuses South Africa of siding with malign actors. How do you confront this sentiment in your interactions with members of Congress in particular?
Well, I certainly say to them there's no malign intent on the part of South Africa. We would be foolhardy to seek to be malign towards one of the most powerful countries in the world. And I believe that the proposed legislation is an overreaction based on wrong interpretation of our foreign policy. There is no way in which support for freedom of others can be seen as antithetical to the political philosophy of the United States of America. So I've made this clear as I meet a range of interlocutors, including journalists. I will be having an interview with the Chicago Tribune later today, and I'll make this point once more. I really think there's a clutching at straws to try and compel South Africa to take up a position that would not in any way fit with our own constitutional framework, as well as the legacy of support for human rights that is part of our own practice as the people of South Africa.
Minister, your comments last week at the Carnegie Foundation that you didn't know whether Iran was an authoritarian regime has also not played well in the halls of Congress. Congressman Jared Maskovitz, the co-author of the bilateral review bill, said, quote, "If she's defending Iran, I have nothing more to add to that," close quote. So allow me to play devil's advocate, if I may. If this was a visit to improve relations with the United States, with members of Congress, who are, of course, as you well know, gunning for South Africa, does feigning ignorance on the conduct of Iran's government and security apparatus bode well for the future relationship with the United States, or does it create more distance between the two countries?
Well, the distance is apparent. I'm here to speak on behalf of South Africa. I'm not here to name any country as having a particular character. That's not my business. And as I say, I'm very clear, as is our country, that America has a right to its own sovereign view on various policy matters. Similarly, South Africa does as well. I've been intrigued at how much sentiment against South Africa there is among some representatives when they don't have similar sentiments against India, with very strong links with Russia, and other countries. So there seems to be a selective isolation of South Africa. Perhaps that speaks to the weight we enjoy in global affairs. So I think it is important that we continue to engage with all stakeholders that we can meet here and attempt to convince them that it is important for us to enjoy a positive relationship, the two. We are very important in our own region of Africa. They're important as a global economic power. If the two of us cannot work well together, it doesn't bode well for a wide range of global affairs. And so really, my purpose is to speak to the importance, not of ditching this relationship, but of strengthening it so that we can contribute to building a positive world.
So let me ask it a different way, Minister. Does authoritarian governments, does authoritarianism, how does that play in terms of South Africa's foreign policy positions?
Well, I mean, if we have a policy position that a particular country is authoritarian, we would say so. But it does not mean if you say so-and-so is authoritarian, that because you're a person with a bigger voice, I must agree with you. So I cannot and will not take on the conceptual use by another country when it is not a position that my country holds.
Is this going to hurt the relationship with the United States moving forward? What's your reading of where this bilateral review act in terms of passing committee in Congress, going to the House? Of course, it has to go to the Senate. Will President Biden sign it if it does pass the Senate? What's your reading of where it goes from here?
My sense is that it might be passed. I'm not certain. But there were very good voices in opposition to it in the debate. And I think the United States, being a country that is very knowledgeable about business and economics, understands that the relationship with South Africa does have strong economic benefits for the United States. So it's also vital that we as South Africans don't define ourselves in a very diminutive fashion, as though we have nothing to offer. The United States gets 15 out of 50 critical minerals from South Africa. And a large part of those, they get the majority from our country, exported from South Africa. So I think it's important we don't see ourselves as some little entity out there that has no role in international affairs. But we also should not be arrogant, and that's why I'm here to engage, and even where it's difficult, to be available to state the case of my country. That is my job. Right. And I'm joined by the South Africans. Plus, as I say to you, the world is not all in the manner in which Representative James may see it. There are very different views in the United States of America.
Sounds like you're quite confident, Minister, that South Africa will remain as part of the recipient countries in terms of the African Growth and Opportunity Act. Of course, that all comes up for review in September of 2025. Have you been able to put your finger your thumb on the scale here in terms of this trip and in ensuring South Africa's continued inclusion?
Well, I think the representatives are not as yet discussing the detail, but I have advocated for retention of South Africa in the act that will be passed in the next year, and have, spelt out the importance of AGOA to South Africa and the African continent, that utilizes the logistics of South Africa to export the goods that fall within the AGOA remit. So we play a large role in successful execution of AGOA, and excluding South Africa will not just impact on our economy, it may very well impact on the other African partners that fall under the remit and provisions of the Act.
Minister, a final question for you on the domestic front. You might have seen this just before you departed for the United States. The African National Congress in the Western Cape says it's thrown your name into the hat as a possible candidate to be the next Western Cape Premier. So I wonder what the future holds for Dr. Naledi Pandor. Are you going to stay in government after the elections, or are you going to go into provincial government in the Western Cape?
Well, all I know at the moment is should the African National Congress get sufficient votes in terms of where I am on the list, I will be in the National Assembly.
And hopefully retain your position in cabinet, or do you have a preference?
I think nobody decides except the incumbent president.
Yes, but we also have hopes and desires, don't we, as individuals?
No, fortunately, I'm not made up in that way.
Dr. Naledi Pandor, always good to see you. Thanks for making time for us. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.